Hello everyone and welcome to us here from the British Dyslexia Association. We are delighted that you're going to join us for this important conversation about women and dyslexia. We've always been aware that the female experience around dyslexia is unique, so it's important that we listen to women's voices. And it's such a privilege for us to be in conversation with some amazing women. We hope that you will get a lot from this conversation. It will be both inspiring and inspirational, we hope. So I have the pleasure to be joined by, and maybe as I go round, ladies, you might want to do a little wave. We start with Raisa, who's from the Scottish Prosecution Service. And then we've got Leanne, who is a BDA trustee, and she has a background in the RAF and NHS. I'm sure she'll talk about that during our chat today. We have Grace from EY. Hi, Grace. We have Jeanette from the Greater London Authority. We have Hannah from American Express. And we've got Gillian, who is one of our most senior leaders here at the BDA. She has a background in teaching, and also she's going to talk to us about being a mum of a daughter with dyslexia as well. And then my colleague Sue Flor, who's head of policy at BDA and has MBE for her services to dyslexia, which we are all incredibly proud of, although she's very modest about it. So, ladies, thank you so much for joining us. As I said, this will be a really exciting conversation. We hope causes lots of other conversations beyond this broadcast, really. So we've got a lot to get through, and I'd like to start really with us talking about your journey with dyslexia, about when you realised you had dyslexia and your journey through identification. So Leanne, if we could start with you to share really where you were at and when you found out you had dyslexia.
Yeah, I was sort of always aware that something wasn't quite right, but I was in the Air Force and had been in the Air Force for some time, and it was really my husband doing a course in the States where you have to declare you're dyslexic if you're on a learning disability if you're on a course, and he recognised traits in me that he thought something, has got to be done. And I was a little bit reticent about doing something because you don't want to be labelled. Anyway, I went to our education centre because I was also doing a degree at the time, and a very kind lady called Carol Tucker took an assessment, and although I'd passed it, she said, Leanne, you have coping strategies, you have very sophisticated coping strategies, and it has been identified since then. And she forced me, literally forced me, to go and get an assessment. I was not really happy about it. And unfortunately, at the time, the military at large, Her Majesty's Forces at large, would pay for the assessment. They withdrew the money the night before I was due to be assessed, which upset me. And I said, well, am I supposed to do this? But my husband was absolutely adamant and drove me to the assessment. So I then spent... Julie did the assessment. My husband was brought in because she said she's not going to remember any of this because she's so tired, and she said she's dyslexic. So I spent the afternoon drinking wine and crying into my wine for the child that I was, and have gone from there really. And has it been a problem? Not really. And actually, nobody in the Air Force knew I was dyslexic until I started wearing coloured lenses. And that was the first time anybody was aware, because I was a little bit like, to coin the phrase, a bit like an addict. I'd hidden it so well. I was just an oddity, really, and nobody knew. So that's my journey, really.
Thanks, Leanne, and we might come back to some of those issues shortly. The idea that you were drinking wine and crying, I think that's an experience that resonates with a lot of people. It's a real emotional journey, really. Hannah, do you want to share your kind of awakening around dyslexia and how it happened?
So my coping strategies really broke down very early. So I was diagnosed at 12. I had really struggled in the education system. I was a bright, bubbly kid, loved theatre, loved mucking around, loved learning stuff. But basically, I got to about 11, 12, and I really, really was struggling at school. It just wasn't what I could do, and I just didn't understand why I was so different. And I became a school refuser. I just stopped going because that's where it hurt. I had terrible migraines, you know, it was just stress and pain all the time. And my mum and my head teacher at the time, they both talked, couldn't work out why, you know, this seemingly intelligent, outgoing child had just deteriorated into a blubbery mess. So they said you've got to take her to an educational psychologist because you've got to find out why this intelligent kid is not thriving in this space. And I have exactly the opposite. It was a relief. It was like, this is the reason. It's not an excuse. I just have a different way of doing things. I have a different way of thinking. So at the age of 12, it was just an enlightenment. A lot of teachers didn't understand. A lot of teachers said I was still lazy. I've still got reports which I just won't throw away that says, oh, she's very, very good in class, but as soon as she writes anything down on a piece of paper, she's useless. And it was just amazing. Several teachers said to me that I'd never amount to anything. And well,
yeah.
Yes,
say
I'm
no
not
more.
going to say anything.
Say no more, Hannah.
But yeah, I feel so sorry that anybody who gets diagnosed with dyslexia feels it's a bad thing. Even then, when dyslexia was not understood, and this is early 80s, I realised in my brain, in my coping mechanisms, that this was a reason for it, and now I could conquer the world.
Fantastic, thanks. And you're right, it's the whole range of emotions I think we will see when those kind of light bulb moments and identifications occur. Any other member of the group like to share? Yes, Jeanette, please do. Jeanette, I think you're on mute.
Yeah.
Perfect.
My journey, it was the journey before that kind of made me kind of decide to actually take an assessment. So at school, I used to go to very good schools, and I didn't have any problem actually understanding the subject, what I was being taught, but I used to always fail exams. And then I went to university, no, sorry, teachers, when I applied for universities, teachers, I was rejected from all my university applications. But then I applied again as a mature student and was accepted. I got a 2-1 degree, and then I applied for a master's. And then at the master's, and during that time again, I kept failing exams. So I went for an assessment, and then it was a relief. It was more as a relief when I actually learned that I had dyslexia. But I think although it was a relief, I didn't feel it really helped me, because the assessment only tells you where you failed and why they've actually identified you as kind of having, for me, it was working memory dyslexia. It didn't actually help me in actually understanding how it manifested itself. So I didn't connect the fact that I was failing exams to working memory and dyslexia. So although I was assessed with it, that was only as I said earlier on, in January 2010. So since that time, I've been learning more and more, and I continue to learn more about how it actually manifests and how it affects me, and the coping strategies that I've been using since school days. So yeah, that's been my journey.
Yeah, thanks, Jeanette. And it shows that the assessment, the identification, is the beginning of a journey, really, isn't it? Like you said, you felt a bit disconnect, or it was just the first step, really. Thank you. Sue, I saw you wanted to share your thoughts.
Sorry, I think mine's slightly different. I haven't been assessed for very long, but school was quite tricky, I suppose. But I think I just grew up with poor self-esteem, going from top sets to bottom sets, always failing exams, always repeating, and so on. And then very, very late in life, I was trying to encourage one of my children to complete their Spanish degree, and they were quite switched off, and I thought, oh, I can do this. I just picked up their books and thought I'd do it myself. And then when it came to exams again, they were getting really tricky. And I think so many times people had suggested I might be dyslexic, and I thought, oh, how rude they are. I really did. Even my sister proofreading something for me, she said, "You sure you're not dyslexic?" Oh, God, you know. And I'd lived with a dyslexic when I was quite young. She'd been diagnosed, and in those days, people weren't very often diagnosed, but she was a troublesome child and lived in different children's homes. And I knew I wasn't like her because she used to say park and things like that backwards. And, you know, obviously, having worked with dyslexia, I knew that there were lots of different characteristics of dyslexia, being dyslexic, but I didn't really associate them with me. And then I thought, maybe I must be, because I can't remember where accents go on these Spanish words that I was going to have in an exam. I'll just get assessed, and then I'll be able to use the computer and the accents will go on automatically. And I did that, and I got a first. And I felt rather a cheat, really. But I did have to go through that. What for me was a very humiliating experience with a psychologist, thinking he thinks I've got sawdust in my head, and it was really, really upsetting to discover so late on that I was dyslexic, even though I had masses of dyslexic children and a dyslexic husband. I just didn't see it in me, but it answered a lot of things, and I think what a shame it didn't happen a lot earlier. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's
Thank
me.
you, Sue. That's very, very moving, actually. Would anyone else who haven't spoken yet? Raisa, yes, love to hear from you.
Hi, yes. So I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I started university. So throughout school, I knew something was not right. Couldn't put my finger on it. I needed more time to do things, and initially, in my first few years of high school, I was really struggling, not understanding the work or what was being said to me. And like we've spoken, I developed coping mechanisms, and my coping mechanism was I started memorizing everything. So I started memorizing everything I would be taught, I would memorize. And as a result of that, I did end up doing quite well in my education, but I wasn't given a diagnosis at that point. Nobody was aware that I was dyslexic, so I was given extra time and things like that. So I think there was some understanding that something wasn't right, but what is it, we don't know. So I continued like that, and off I went to university. So I went to the University of Aberdeen to study law, and I turned up to the learning support office, and I said, I've started university, and I get extra time for my work, so if you can arrange that for all my classes here and that sort of thing. And they're looking at me like, well, what's wrong with you for you to get extra time? You can't just demand that. And I said, I don't know. I just got it in school. And they said, right, okay, something isn't quite right here. And they offered the assessment. So reluctantly, I agreed to do the assessment, and it came out that I was dyslexic, and I also have dyspraxia. And I do have to say, my university was very supportive about it all. But I felt good because it gave me a sense of that explains what's going on. Now I can fit it all together. But equally, I also felt a moment of anger and a bit upset that, well, I felt stupid all these years, but I'm not silly. I'm not, there's an explanation as to why I work in a certain way and I understand things in a certain way. And I then started to understand myself and my dyslexia a lot better. Graduated and I got a traineeship with the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service as a trainee solicitor. And qualified recently with them as well. And I decided to become a ambassador for dyslexia and dyspraxia at COPFS, and it's amazing. I love raising awareness of dyslexia and dyspraxia because I feel like I don't want anyone to feel how I felt, feeling what's wrong with me, what is this? Why do I do things in a certain way? So yeah, that's my journey, and so far, and here we are.
Yeah, thanks, Razor, and thank you so much for what you're doing for our community. You're a fantastic role model, and what an inspirational woman you are. So thank you. Let's move on a bit then. So on the back of, what you've talked about, and different responses actually to being aware of dyslexia, being identified, what are our thoughts about experience as a woman with dyslexia? Do we feel that your experiences with that has been different and unique because you are a woman as well? And Racer, I saw that you'd started us off. So start us off, please, Racer. I'd love to hear what you're going to say.
So I think being obviously a female, but also a female of an ethnic minority, that has its own challenges. I can't speak for, males and say, this is my comparison to them. But what I can say is, as women, we've faced our own challenges. But being also an ethnic minority, sometimes it is hard and it is difficult in terms of our confidence levels. And I think it's something you really have to work on. And me personally, I have felt in some ways I was relieved with my dyslexia diagnosis, but I think it knocks my confidence a bit initially, and I did have to really work on that. And being in the environment that I am, confidence is important, and confidence is something I have to spend a lot of time growing. And like I said, being also of a minority background as well can have its own challenges. But yeah, I think you can feel that sense of imposter syndrome, which I know we're going to go into.
Yes. Well, please do, do chat about that now, Racer. I mean, this is just a conversation. So yeah, it sounds like we're heading that way around that issue as well, isn't it?
And you feel that sense of other, you're another sometimes, and you think, is I have got this role, I have this responsibility, I have achieved this. And I think it's very easy to fall into that imposter syndrome and question yourself and think, oh, I'm going to get caught out now. Can I do this? And I think I've really struggled with that for quite some time, is can I do it? Can I do it? Am I able to reach this goal? And I think it's very important that we have that belief in ourselves. And my journey of dyslexia has taught me that it's so important to believe in yourself and not think that your dyslexia is going to limit you, because my dyslexia certainly has not limited me in any way. And in fact, I now treat it as a gift, because there's qualities, as I'm sure we've all experienced, that we as dyslexics have that perhaps other people don't. And for me, it's how I interpret things, or how I understand things and see things from different points. So yeah, like that's how I would say my experiences.
Thanks. I can see everyone's hands up. So Grace, yes, let's get chatting. This is really important.
Yeah.
Grace.
No, well, I think Rachel makes a great point, and especially in terms of the coping strategies, because I think with women, actually, once you get a diagnosis, because we develop these coping strategies, actually, the diagnosis helps us to understand our skill set and what strategies we have come up with and formed, and then actually what that means for our skill set. And I think it's really interesting just listening to everyone actually at the point they got diagnosed and the age they were, because I think so. I was diagnosed during my A levels, and I always thought that was quite late to be diagnosed. But actually, in this group, in terms of age, it seems I was diagnosed second. So I think that is also something that, because women have these coping strategies, with we are diagnosed more typically later in life. And I think we do see it. So I co-chair EY's dyslexia and dyspraxia community, and very much kind of a lot of our members get diagnosed at work, both men and women, but when those coping strategies break down, or even sometimes, and I know Gillian has a dyslexic child, is some of our more senior men and women, they recognise they're dyslexic when they have a dyslexic child, but actually their dyslexia might have not really impacted them, because I know I think there's something like about 41 different traits that may display within dyslexics, but each dyslexic individual displays 1 to 3 that are more apparent. So like Jeanette was saying about the working memory, but then everyone is different. So yeah, and I think maybe that also leads into the imposter syndrome, because there's not one diagnosis. So actually kind of how do you understand yourself and then also communicate that and understand other people who apparently have the same diagnosis as you, but they're different.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Grace. Gillian, I think it's good to come to you now as a mum, but also a teacher as well. Your background's teaching and assessment.
Yes, so many, you know, the conversation's moved on. I've had so many points going on in my mind. So I'm going to sort of chip in with various bits and pieces, and I think it'll all sort of flow. But basically, just to say, you know, for my child is actually an adult, so that's been quite a journey. But she had to be reassessed to access disabled students' allowance to go to university. And so she was 17 at that point, and I remember her confidence plummeted. She was absolutely floored, because as a 17-year-old, she discovered she had a reading age of something like 9 to 10 years. And, you know, she just felt thick and useless, and that didn't really capture any of the strengths that she had and has. You know, so I think building her up in after that is really important. So what happens after a diagnosis is important. Talking about imposter syndrome as a female, I have a very inspirational friend, and she always says, and you know, not to put men down at all, but she always says, you know, actually women look at a job advert and they'll say, well, I've got 8 of these essential things, so I can't apply for that job because I haven't got all 10 that they want. And a man will look at it and say, well, I've got two of these things, so I'll apply. And you know, and she always encourages me to have sharp elbows and push to the front of the queue. And you know, I think that's just it stays with me all the time, because we often feel as women generally that are we going to be found out in some sort of way? Are we really skilled enough for this job? And you know, I think that's something about our female profile. And then with dyslexia as well, there are those additional challenges. And I'm just going to finish with, as an assessor, I remember I assessed this child, very bright child, and she was 14, and her mum said, I really didn't think that she had any issues, because she got into the local grammar school and, you know, she's doing really well. And her friendship group was a group of very bright girls, and they were all very big readers, and they were reading Harry Potter. And she said, but there was a moment where I realised she wasn't reading Harry Potter, she was carrying the book around. And her friends were reading Harry Potter. And, you know, so coping strategies, you know, we do those things. We sit by people that we know are going to give us those little bits of extra information that we need when we're in that school setting. You know, and these are great coping strategies, but underneath it, there was a child there with dyslexia. So I'm going to stop because I've thrown so much in.
Thank you, Jenny. No, it's real food for thought. I love the job application. So I've never heard that before.
I think it's really.
Oh, sorry,
Oh,
Hannah,
sorry.
go for it.
I think
No,
it's really
please do.
interesting, that whole job application thing, because I've fallen into that. So although I was diagnosed really early compared with the group, now I feel like I'm an imposter because I'm too fell apart too early. But anyway, I'll get over that. The whole thing about work has been that I just have kept it quiet. Work, or you know, for years. I've been at this company nearly 24 years, and it was only about 4 or 5 years ago when a colleague of mine suggested I did a lunch and learn and spoke about my dyslexia, because I just kept it quiet. And, you know, another coping mechanism, just keep it quiet. But equally, in that job application thing, which be those two things that I couldn't do would probably be reading policy or reading something, or quick on your feet because you need a quick working memory, and I'd be going, oh, I can't do that, even though I had the 80%. So it's a really interesting scenario that we fall into. Is it because we're women? Is it because we're dyslexic? Is it because we're highly intelligent? I'd like to think that for the group, but you know, there's loads of different factors. We're not just one thing. We're not just dyslexic. No. And that's my imposter syndrome bit there.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Stella. And sorry.
Yeah.
Go on,
Oh,
Grace.
sorry.
No,
No, I
please
was going
do.
to say, and just on that point of, is it this, is it that? One thing I think very exciting over the next 10, 15 years is that we have the chance to be the change makers and
Yes.
educate and really kind of push the dialogue forwards on dyslexia and neurodiversity. And on the point of neurodiversity, I think actually, I know at the moment we generally say neurodiversity and neurotypical, but in my mind, no one is neurotypical. Like the whole population, dyslexic or not, dyspraxic or not, just it's just that some people meet a certain criteria that means they may need additional support. But I think actually the general population are neurodiverse. It is a whole spectrum, and everyone has strengths and weaknesses and a different skill set. And I think generally in society, that's a big thing around all D&I agendas, is actually getting into, I guess, probably psychological safety, and actually your whole kind of person and what really makes you who you are and helps you to do what you do. So I think it's a really interesting point.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, Grace. Sue, I know you want to share.
Yeah. Oh, I'm off. Yeah. I think it's really interesting that Hannah was diagnosed so early. And I like to think that none of my children suffer from imposter syndrome, because the earlier you're diagnosed, the more confidence you can build up, especially if you have emotional intelligence and a mother behind you supporting you. And I think all of my children, all are dyslexic and are all very successful and just don't have imposter syndrome. So I think it's really important to be able to talk about it and to be diagnosed very early.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. And Leanne, I know you've wanted to chip in.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a very, what was, and probably still is, a very masculine background, being in the forces. But, you know, I was thinking about this, and I'm old enough, because I am old enough, you know, that, you know, it's the thing of what a little girl's made of, what a little boy's made of. And I think when you talk about women in dyslexia, if you're a man or male, and I've seen this in my own family, you know, it's almost a natural acceptance that you could possibly be male and be dyslexic. But because you're a female and you present yourself the way we do, and there is, I mean, I certainly have suffered from imposter syndrome, you know, and that's why I've hidden things so well over the years. Even now, I've got people say, you can't be dyslexic, because as we know, I'm a trustee of the BDA and the vice chair, I might add. But you know, I think there is still a little bit, it's not as bad as possibly Jeanette and I and Sue and a couple of others, because we're slightly older. I think we've gone through the generation, and hopefully we've been some of the, you know, girls are not denied things that as they were when we were younger. We're not that old, but it's not that far away. But I do think there's still a little bit of a stigma if you're female and you say you're dyslexic or neurodiverse, dyspraxic, and sometimes I don't think there's as much acceptance if you're in the extreme or the severe cases where you definitely, you know, can probably not hide your coping strategies. I think most of us here have been quite successful in coping strategies, but I'm not still sure in my own mind, it's personal opinion, that our society is still accepting of girls, women, females, however you identify yourself, having that slight difference. If
Thank
that's
you.
the right way to describe it.
Yeah, no, thank you. And Jeanette, I know you wanted to share your thoughts as well. It's interesting.
Yeah, just to pick up on the point that a number of people have made about imposter syndrome. So I grew going to school, I never felt, because I didn't understand what was actually wrong with me, but I understood that I could understand what the teachers were saying. I didn't have a problem in actually understanding the subjects, the topics that I was learning. The only issue I had was that I couldn't perform in exams. So for me, it was always about proving to other people that I am as good as I think that I am. And that kind of transferred into the work environment as well, because also with working memory, interviews are very challenging. So, I mean, I was one, actually, in those instances, I used to always apply for jobs because I've been rejected so many times at interviews because of the issues, because of the barriers. I found myself applying for jobs that I was like kind of meeting like a kind of 90 to 100% of the criteria. But, you know, with the challenges, I'd never get through that. So, you know, I wouldn't take no for an answer. I would like feedback and then explain why this interview process does not work to my strengths. And then, you know, some employers might reply, but yeah, so it was always about me trying to prove myself, trying to let people know, look, there is more to me than this. I can't explain why I am this way, but please give me a chance.
And do you feel you were listened to when you shared those thoughts, Jeanette? Or was that a barrier as well, actually getting your voice heard?
Yeah, that was a barrier as well. There's not much understanding. There's also kind of, I think there was an occasion where, this was before I was assessed, where I was tempted to say that I had a disability, dyslexia. I didn't know, but then I thought, you know, I don't have issues with reading and writing and stuff like that, so it can't be. And I think that's it as well. So although I can articulate myself, I don't know. I think for employers that they can't connect the two. So, you know, I always got told whenever I explain that, you know, when I get very nervous in interviews and it doesn't help. Oh, if you practice, but you know, that lack of understanding, I can't get past that until they actually understand that. And because of kind of their perception of me, it's not enough. They don't feel that, okay, maybe I need to take notice of this and maybe I need to research a bit more. So they were convinced that, you know, I was a problem. I had the problem. So yeah, that was another barrier. So although I kind of said, look, this, that, and the other, it wasn't kind of believed or understood or taken seriously because of perceptions as well.
Yes, thanks, Leah. Thanks, Jeanette. And Leanne wants to come in as well. Thanks,
Yeah,
Jeanette.
I want to stress that although I felt always an imposter, I have to say I was exceptionally lucky throughout my RF career that I was always treated as an equal peer alongside my male compatriots, you know, and I never felt occasionally, and really it's because of the day and age that, no, you can't do that because we haven't had a girl do that particular job, but I always competed with my peers equally, and I want to stress that. I wasn't
Yeah, no,
treated
that's lovely to hear
as a
about our
girl.
military. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I have great friends and colleagues, so I was very.
That's really positive, actually, in that way. Hannah, and then Gillian.
And I was just thinking, Jeanette, when you were talking about, you know, your working memory, my biggest challenge, I have working memory troubles as well, but my biggest challenge is timekeeping. And I have had to educate my direct leaders in the challenges that I have. And it wasn't until I was giving a lift home to one of my direct leaders to her car because she parked it somewhere else. And she asked me, why is your clock in your car 4 minutes fast? And I said, because I'm always late. And if I put my clock 4 minutes fast, it helps me not to be so late for my kids and picking them up. And that was the moment where she figured out that instead of just having a go at me for being 2 or 3 minutes late for a meeting, I actually have a trouble with this. And so from my perspective, I shout about everything, anybody's problems, anything, mine a lot, because I know about them. But as soon as I found out about anybody else's, I try and shout about those as well. It's a real education factor. From my perspective, I've got that opportunity now, mould, that I can be belligerent, and I love it. I don't think I would have been belligerent as a child.
No, I think we aspire to be difficult women, don't we, ladies? We want to be difficult women. And the story of dyslexia, the history is often a story and a history of difficult women, in the best possible sense of that word. And here's one of my most favourite difficult women, is Gillian. I mean that as a compliment, you know I do.
I thought you were going to say Sue then. I'm
No.
going.
She's my second favourite.
So I was just listening, and it just suddenly, light bulb moment, really, that just picking up on what Sue said and some of what Jeanette and Leanne have said, that in all of this, really, it seems that, when we've got inspirational women around us, the journey perhaps is a little bit easier. So what does that mean for our future? Are we the next inspirational women out there? Who are we inspiring? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think we should come back to that, Gillian. I know Sue wants to share, and then I suppose, it's talking about now as we bring this conversation to an end, is do we feel optimistic about the future for our young girls and women? So hold that thought. We'll come to Sue, and then maybe we'll have a think about the future as well. Sue, you're on mute.
Sorry, so
That's
sorry.
okay. It still happens, doesn't it, to us all?
I just wanted to add what Hannah said. So many calls come through to our helpline from people who say, they've been reprimanded for going late to work, or getting children late to school, and they're simply told, "Why don't you get an alarm clock?" People just don't understand that, and it's really sad that there's still so much awareness that we need to get out there to employers, to everybody, really, that what dyslexia actually means, and but we need to show them how the positive side of it and what we can give, and to forget about those issues. We can do it in less time. Doesn't matter if we get there late.
Yeah. And Sue, actually, I didn't mention the fact that, and I do apologise, that you're also head of our helpline. So I'm wondering, bearing in mind what you've just said, do you feel that female voices coming through? I know it's hard to put you on the spot like this, but just anecdotally, is there a different female voice as mothers for speaking up for themselves and so on? Is that a different voice, do we feel?
99% of calls come from female.
Really?
And like Gillian, I've noticed when I've been assessing, because I'm an assessor too, that women will actually come in, or girls, with knowing what is wrong. No, not perhaps knowing that they have dyslexia, but knowing where the weaknesses are. Well, when I see a male, they usually say, "There's nothing wrong with me." And you think, well, why are you here? And perhaps their mothers have pushed them forward for an assessment. And it's the female voice that comes through to our helpline, and they're more intuitive. And
yeah, interesting, isn't it? Anyone else want to add to what Sue and Gillian have just said? Grace, yes.
Yeah. Well, no, I guess to add, but also I think, Donald, when you were saying looking to the future,
Yes.
I think we've all kind of identified skills that we either see as strengths or things that we might struggle with. And I know that obviously with technology, we've been through a pandemic, the future of work, and what does that look like? And when Jeanette was saying about an interview process, is something that I think we need to think about, and society is thinking about it, and kind of in the next 10, 20, 30 years, it will be really interesting to see how that changes. So from my side, I'm very optimistic, because I think previously, very much at school, you're academic or you're not, and then you have to take exams, and then you go to university, and then you get on a graduate scheme, and very much employers would look at grades, and that would be the assessment. Whereas now, so EY have actually taken away the requirement of a 2-1 for their graduate scheme, and that was a few years ago. And then we also have an apprenticeship scheme. So actually, I think the world of work is becoming a lot more skills orientated. So if kind of, I don't know, like 5-10 years ago, if I was going to say something to myself, or actually say something to those students now that are just starting secondary school or thinking about their future career, it's understand your skill set, because I think there's a lot of things will change in the future. And I think also with technology, I'll probably quote the fact wrong, but I think no one, or it's quite rare to have the same job or the same type of job for your whole career. So how do you actually prepare children, be them dyslexic, dyspraxic, or actually just kind of not showing many apparent traits that may need support, for careers that don't exist yet? And that's, I think, very much where actually wider society marries up with dyslexics, dyspraxics, anyone who registers as neurodiverse. But then I'm contradicting myself, because previously I said everyone is neurodiverse, but still we haven't defined dyslexicon, and we need to. But I think very much it's, if you understand your skill set, then we can help everyone progress. So
Yeah.
personally, I think, yeah, well, I'm very optimistic, and
Great.
especially being quite early on in my career, kind of optimistic for myself, but also those for the future, for men and women.
Brilliant. Thanks, Grace. It sounds great what EY's doing. But also on the back of what you've just said, I'm wondering is those who are neurodiverse, will they have an advantage? As you say, Grace, you think in the future we're going to have a number of different careers. Do we think those with dyslexia are better able to adjust in that way? It's part of their superpowers. Racer, I'm wondering what you think. Do you feel optimistic for the future of our girls and women?
I do feel very optimistic for the future, and for females with dyslexia in particular. But I've said this to you before, Donna, and I'll say it again, that I think there will be an advantage in terms of the gifts that I keep saying of dyslexia, or of any other conditions like dyspraxia, dyscalculia. I think you're able to adjust yourself, you're adapting to certain situations, your skills to certain situations that are out of your comfort zone. And also, and I said this about myself, and I appreciate not everybody with dyslexia has the same experiences, but I said about how I interpret things and how I see things from lots of different angles. One person might see something from one point, and I'll have 20 different outsets looking into it, and I think that's an advantage of having a learning condition like dyslexia. So I do feel hopeful and optimistic, and I think recently actually I read an article somewhere about a certain company, was it, and they were looking in particular for those who have dyslexia in particular, and that was really good to see. It's very promising.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Thanks, Racer. And Sue, I'm wondering for you as a mother of daughters with dyslexia and a grandmother of granddaughters with dyslexia, are you feeling optimistic for their future?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel quite advantaged actually over other members of family who are brilliant, who've come into our family who are not dyslexic. I can see we're far more interesting, we're far more creative, and we can see the whole picture where, okay, they're not, but we're better off. It's exciting as long as we're diagnosed early and have that confidence and don't have poor self-esteem. And I think we all need to keep pushing people for early diagnosis and get the help we need.
And you ladies are all fantastic role models, so as long as we all keep talking and BDA does what BDA do, together we can make these changes. Jeanette, I don't know if you want to share anything about your views on the future. Are we going to a better place, do you think?
I'm hopeful, but I think there's still a journey. I've had comments where I've fed back to employers where they suggest that accommodations would give unfair advantage. So although kind of you're raising awareness that there's still those challenges in actually kind of bringing those changes. But I guess the more that we do and the more of us that are able to do it, then yes, I am hopeful.
Yeah, but I like what you said. It's still a journey. We're not there yet, are we? Hannah, what are your thoughts on this?
I think the world's a much better place than it was in the 80s when I was at school.
The
It's a
fashion's
much better
better,
place.
certainly, isn't it, Hannah? The
I
fashion's
don't
better.
know. I've still got some of the dresses upstairs. But I think it's better than it was when I was at university. I think it is improving, but like everything around inclusion, it takes people to share and educate others. Because until you can walk in somebody else's shoes, you won't understand what it's like. That whole bit where one of my leaders, suddenly realised that timekeeping was my challenge. We're all so blinkered now, especially with Zoom calls and everything. We're so blinkered now. It's just us. It's me in the house. It's my kids. It's my dad. It's whoever's around. Dealing with the cat jumping up. And we're all self-centered, which is absolutely right to survive. But we have to listen and we have to learn, and that has to continue, because we're never going to get to the point where we're all knowing and all gathering. That's never going to happen, but we have to push there. We have to get to that horizon as quickly as possible for every inclusive opportunity.
Yeah. So still work to be done. We mustn't be complacent.
Always.
Yeah,
Always.
definitely,
Yes.
Hannah.
It's the fourth bridge. We have to
the
keep
fourth
painting
bridge.
it.
Yes, it is. Sue, you've got your hand
last
up.
word. As many people may not know, but next year is the 50th anniversary of the British Dyslexia Association. And in speaking to the founders, members of her family, she died saying that she hoped very soon there would be no need for the Dyslexia Association, and that was, I don't know, that was about 30 years ago.
And that's Marion Welshman, isn't it, Sue, who was one of our fans. So founded by a woman, isn't it?
Absolutely, and all the pioneers were.
Yes.
But she felt that what she was doing would soon infiltrate, and there will be no need for us. But there sadly still is, and we've still got a lot of work to do. 50 years.
Yes, we do. Leanne, as a trustee, and obviously your background and a woman with dyslexia, are you optimistic for the future?
I am, as people have already said, Grace is talking about skills, and I think people need to, because I think as well, we still haven't got people in the general populace to understand that dyslexia is just not reading and writing. It does affect our whole lives, not significantly, but it does affect our day-to-day living activities. And I'm forever saying this to people. I normally have magnets on my cooker, because despite having 2 degrees, I can't work out which knob on the cooker will ignite or work the plates on the cooker. And people often come into the house and think, what? But it's not reading and writing. And Sue's right. In fact, all the comments, we can bring them all in. We shouldn't need British BDA at all. It's in its 50th year, but I've got young cousins and I've got a nephew, that they're starting off in their lives. Rana and Grace are sort of much younger than I am. They're setting off in their lives, and BDA is still needed. But I am optimistic, and I am optimistic as a woman as well. That things that I experienced in my early careers, girls or ladies, women, whatever, they will not have to experience what and comments, etc. And certainly under the dyslexia, I think it is moving, and technology, Rani brought this up earlier, technology is change the way, and I think a dyslexic brain is perfect for that environment.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Leanne. And you're right, we aspire to put ourselves out of business at BDA. We may be one of the only organisations that trying to do that. So
we've still got so much to do.
We do. We still plenty of work, Sue.
I know from our work with our European colleagues that it was quite disappointing that we found that organisations still are not aware of dyslexia.
Long way to go. Raisa, I can see your hand up, and then I'll come to Gillian about her thoughts for the future. Raisa, did you want to share something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, we do, of course, have a lot of work we still need to do, and that's evident. But like Leanne said, I think also the focus needs to be on the understanding of what dyslexia is. It's not just reading and writing. And, you know, I've had quite a few comments in the past about that. And I thought, no, that's not what dyslexia is. And, you know, someone said to me recently, you don't look dyslexic, you don't seem dyslexic. I said, well, how should it look and how should it seem? You know, and I think it's that perception of dyslexia means you can't read and you can't write, and we all know that that's not just dyslexia. It's so much more bigger than that, so much more broad. That's what to just add.
Yeah, no, very wise words, Racer. I mean, you talked before around other identities that we all have as well, with cultural identities, our heritage, as well as gender. And that comes back to intersectionality, which is what we're talking a lot about nowadays. So in those ways, we kind of always knew it, but now we have a proper understanding. So hopefully the journey is underway, but we know that we've got a long way to go as well. Gillian, any thoughts on that one? As a mum, as well as obviously you're a senior leader at BDA and a woman, are we heading to good places? What do you think?
I think that I like the idea of a journey. I think there is a big journey for us as women anyway. So with or without dyslexia, I think that is, what we've got now that maybe we didn't have before, is that aspiration and that expectation that we can achieve as well as men. And I think that's really good because it puts us on that front foot. But we know that there's still issues around accessing assessments. So ideally, having an early assessment is perfect, but we know that that's not reality. So for boys and girls, so there's a whole job to do there, and that's where Sue and I, we in policy, we work very closely with our colleagues to raise that awareness and to try to make those changes. But I do think that the more we give our girls and our women that expectation to play to their strengths and to know that they can stride out in the world and make a difference, then they will have the confidence to do it. And I do definitely see that at the British Dyslexia Association, that's our key role. That we can say to people, yes, you can do it.
Brilliant. And I think that's a perfect message, isn't it, ladies, to end our discussion on. We've overran. We knew it would. We've had lots to say. Thank you so much. I feel like maybe we all need to go away and go and have a drink somewhere, socially distanced drink, because it's been such a delight to chat with you. On a more serious note, for those of you who are listening to this conversation, if it's resonated with you, if you need some support, and we've touched you around the issues that we've talked about during this conversation, please do reach out to us here at the BDA. This is what we are here for. We are here to support and inspire and get you through whatever journey you happen to be on, whether you are a wonderful female or a wonderful male as well, because we've got lots of males in our lives. We don't want to, this session was not about putting anyone down. It was about inspiring us all, isn't it? Because we can't all be in the place we want to be if we don't take everybody with us, isn't it? And that's what it's all about. So thank you, my inspirational women. It's been such a delight.
Thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. And what you guys do makes a massive difference. I've been so privileged to know you all in the ways that, you're trying to change the world. So yes, it's very exciting times, actually. So that just leaves me to say goodbye to everybody, all our listeners. And as I say, please do keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, Donna.
everybody.